Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS-Inform. I'm Bill Potter, your host, and joining us in the studio, we're very honored to have on a weekly basis the state senator for this district, Mark Messmer. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hello, Bill. Great to be here again. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's good to have you. Now, there is a lot of action that has been happening this week, and let's talk about what's been happening in the legislature.
Okay, well, we had 33 bills. We finished up a final passage on in the Senate this week. Gives us 72 bills total. And I had a couple of bills progress, through one on final passage, one finished on committee hearing on Monday and amending on Thursday.
Okay.
So the bill that would allow the Bainbridge Township Jasper Library Board to, if they wanted to bring in the Madison Township area and Boone Township area into their library district, now they can. Well, it'll have to pass in the House, but it passed 49-1, and the one fellow who voted against it, I said, "Didn't you like my bill?" He said it had nothing to do with that. He said, "I didn't want anybody to have a perfect bill in their first bill in the Senate." So
yeah, that was your first bill, not your first one that you've submitted. This is the first bill that you had to go through all the.
Yep, that I was lead author, and I'd got several folks that liked it and wanted to be added as co-authors. So it passed 49-1 on Tuesday. And so that one is moving on to the Senate, and Representative Cherry, who's on the committee for local government, was definitely interested in helping move that bill through the House side. So he's taking it and running it, and we'll watch that one the second half of session. But I'll present that bill in the House committee, and then after it moves out of committee, then the House sponsor will take it through the floor and for final passage.
Will it go through pretty easy?
It should.
Okay.
Yeah, there was really no disagreement, on what we're doing. It's what it's going to allow is the current advisory board for Bainbridge Township will get to keep their appointing authority. They'll have to appoint somebody from either the Madison or Boone Township area that's getting pulled in, but they get the control of who that appointment is by, and then the city council gets to keep their appointment. By current law says if you have multiple townships in a library district, which you can, the county commissioners get 2 appointments, and the county council gets 2 appointments, and the school board gets the other 3. If you were just a municipality only in one township, the commissioners get 1, the county council gets 1, city council gets 1, and the township advisory board gets 1. This will allow that appointing, who gets to make the appointments to stay the same, and allow them to spill over within the city limits, into more than one township, as long as the advisory board's appointment is by somebody in the area that's getting added. So passed cleanly out of the committee, and 49-1 on the floor, and off to the House. And then had another bill that got out of committee and finished amending yesterday that would give LP suppliers the ability to have what they call an affirmative defense. If they go to court now, currently, if there's a accident involving an LP gas supplier, they have no protection in court. It's usually, the court action gets filed, and the judge determines, who was involved and a percentage of fault, and it might be anywhere from 1% to 100% of each person, but that shared liability or that shared cost is their only mechanism of trying to beat down, how much they were at fault. Well, if a consumer does something, they take a safety off of a device, or they take a gas grill into a house, and burn the house down. The liability, for the LP supplier, if it's deemed that it was by, a negligent act, either using something it wasn't intended for or using it improperly by the consumer, and the LP supplier had no awareness, they hadn't signed off on what they did, it'll give them the ability to have some way to prove innocence in court. Natural gas suppliers, their liability stops at the meter. LP supplier, their liability stops where the vent products go through the roof or out the wall. So this gives them what they call an affirmative defense position. First bill I've ever had in either civil law or criminal law in the House or the Senate. So I was a little nervous being in a committee with all attorneys.
Yeah,
But
that could be a little scary.
it was a little intimidating, but we had good dialogue, had good input from witnesses that came in. They made a few suggestions to, kind of clear up some definitions and tighten it up, and made it even a better bill. And so it'll be up for final passage on Monday.
Okay, so in the Senate.
In the Senate,
and it will go.
Then it'll go to the House as well.
All right, and I understand there was a little hazing when you get your first Senate bill passed. There's a little
right. House or Senate. Your first in the House, it was always Representative Charlie Brown who came up and did the they pick on you a little bit, and they ask you questions about your bill and ask you questions about usually the section in code that it's from, and may not have anything to do with your bill, but they usually try to get you stumped, and I knew it was coming. So I read, my bill was a half of one page, which that's a good bill when when you can actually read them and understand them. Mm-hmm. But there's about 15 pages of library code. So the night before I read it cover to cover pretty thoroughly. So when Senator Mike Young is always the person who comes up and picks on the new people, and he asked me questions for about 5 minutes and finally gave up.
Because you answered them all.
Right.
Well, you're well studied in your bill. In the Senate, then there's some bills that are going through. There was one concerning agriculture.
Yep, we had a good bill in Ag Committee on Monday that will be a long-term fix to right now the projections for or trajectory for ag value. It's over the next few years, it's going to go up about another 50% of where the assessment is now if we don't do any changing. And we talked to the folks at Purdue, Larry DeBoer, who is the person in charge of, writing that formula. He said there's things I can do that would be legal, that would meet all constitutional checks on valuation of land, on how I put in inputs and interest rates and things that I use. But he said, but I really don't want to do it without being directed by the General Assembly to do it. So we had a bill Monday. It permanently keeps in place the what they call the soil productivity factors, which about 3 or 4 years ago, the Department of Local Government Finance wanted to adopt some new soil productivity factors that the USDA came out with, which that alone was going to raise assessments from 5 to 50% for everybody. So we put in that bill, Senate Bill 409, I believe was the number. It'll currently keep our current productivity factors that we're using in place, unless we in the legislature tell the DLGF to adopt the new ones. Because every year we keep extending the old ones, We're just going to make it permanent, unless we tell them otherwise. And then within that, it sets the current rate of $2,050, per acre. That's the current value. We're going to freeze it for a year, and then require the calculation factors be reanalyzed. Because if they put market-based interest rates in rather than the Fed's rate, and some other things they can do on how they apply rentals and ag prices. He said there's things they can do that will bring that calculation formula down to a more reasonable rate. But he needed us to say it needed to be done, so we did that on Monday.
And this is for ag acres, not
for residential property,
okay.
But there's a specific independent formula that they came up with several years ago. We tweaked it a few years ago, but right now, with crop prices, half of what they were, just a couple years ago, those high years of corn prices and soybean prices, they were high for so long, that right now all you have in the formula is the high ones. Well, if the prices come down dramatically, a half or more from what it was at the high, it's going to take about 4 or 5 years for those high prices, to factor out of the formula. And then, so in the meantime, we've got land value prices that are assessing that are going to scheduled to go from $2,050 an acre to like $3,080 an acre. I mean, over the next 4 or 5 years, until those high prices, come out of the old formula. So, we're trying to get one that's more, more indicative of the cost of doing business for the farmer. So it's based more on their ability to pay.
Okay.
So that I would expect that to get pretty smooth sailing, through the General Assembly as well.
There have been no laws that have been passed yet because you're first receiving some bills from the House. And
Correct.
And your bills are now going to the House, then that takes time.
Yeah, we'll have about another 2 weeks of finishing up, bills in the Senate, 2.5 weeks, that we'll finish up processing all of the Senate bills. Now, it is possible in a real emergency that they could have passed a House bill quickly and sent it to the Senate, or we could have passed a Senate bill quickly, and it's legal to go ahead and do a House bill early, or a Senate bill in the House early, but there was nothing that we had anything with that pressing of a deadline for this session. So it looks like we'll run through all the Senate bills up through about the early March, same on the House, and then those bills will switch sides and start processing the other chambers bills in the second week in March.
How's the winery bill?
It made final passage in the Senate. It's off to the House. I've got a couple of technical amendments that we'll work on, that things that we caught as we were going along, as we drafted the bill in committee, and then as we got the bill to the floor, there were some things that were caught when it got to the floor, but we didn't have really time to. I mean, we didn't hold the bill for another week to get all the answers we needed to tweak it. So we got an amendment that I'm getting ready for the House Public Policy Committee, for the House author to go ahead and finish up a few clarifications on it. But it should be smooth sailing. Mm-hmm. So that'll be one that'll get dealt with, early in the second half on the House side.
Now, there has been talk about the Sunday alcohol sales.
Mm-hmm.
But that hasn't really happened in the Senate yet.
No, it's
Okay.
currently in a House bill that's being authored by Representative Dermody, and I think it's scheduled for hearing next week in public policy in the House. I've been talking to Representative Dermody, throughout this session, and the Senate Chairman of Public Policy. If it's going to get out of committee and through the House, I mean, for it to progress, I could pretty well anticipate what's going to have to be in it. Currently the retailers that want it on Sunday are the large retailers. Mm-hmm. They really don't have to follow the same rules on how and where their product is displayed in their stores. They can pretty well put it wherever they want. And for a packaged liquor store, you've got to be 21 to enter. And the training requirement for their clerks is much higher. I would anticipate if it's going to move, the Representative Dermody, who is the author and the chairman of the committee, he's going to want how the product is displayed in a large retail store. At least get the hard liquor segregated in an area where people under 21 don't have access to it in the store. That would at least keep the cost of doing business for the package guy and the cost of doing business for the big retailer somewhat on the level playing field, because it'll probably end up being no more sales or a drop in sales. I mean, I wouldn't, for the package store, but mm-hmm. they're going to have an extra day to be open for probably, the same net sales. The large retailer, wants that Sunday sales because most of their clients are there on Saturday and Sunday. Mm-hmm. So they've got a potential to pick up some sales, probably at the loss of the packaged liquor guy. But if they're going to make that change, we've got to try to keep the how it's displayed, how it's sold, the training for the clerks, for that, somewhat, comparable between those two types of retailers.
Probably for a lot of bills, this one might be is trying to find that happy medium mm-hmm. to where both sides, because one side wants way over here and the other side wants way over here. You just got to find that place that works.
You got to find a balance point. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if that one moves through the House, and I know that's what Senator Alting is going to require when it comes to the Senate. If it doesn't have that in the House, I mean, I'm totally sure that he's going to require that, for it to continue to move. I think everybody agrees on the idea of convenience for the shopper. And it's not that we don't have alcohol available on Sundays. You can buy it at a sporting venue, you can buy it at a restaurant, you can buy it at a farm winery or a microbrewery. Mm-hmm. You can even have takeout of those products, in limited areas. But the reason the reason it hasn't moved recently at the retail level is because that unlevel playing field that exists currently, and being able to keep everybody on a similar cost basis to make that change.
Still hammering it out. Anything else you'd like to bring up?
Well, there was a couple of bills of interest. There was one on controlled projects that could impact projects like the library project that's coming up. If a community saves money in advance, builds up money over a long time, and they've got the ability to pay cash for a project. We passed a bill out of the Senate that would relieve them of the referendum requirements. So, I mean, I guess the point of a referendum is it's going to be that you do that, for two reasons. You got to borrow money, which means it's going to, cost the taxpayers, a little more money in the interest. And when you do it by referendum, it takes that project, off of the tax cap. So you're agreeing to a tax increase when you do what they call a controlled project and approve it by referendum. If you're frugal and I want to do something in 5 or 10 years and you save the money up to do it, and you don't have to borrow money above the thresholds for the referendum, you could do a project, that would be of the same, referendum size, but if you're not borrowing money to do it, it would relieve you of the requirement to have a referendum on it. So that should in the end save taxpayers money, so that's a good thing. Another one that we passed I thought was kind of interesting. It would allow the State Board of Accounts is supposed to audit every local unit of government, from township board up to city council, county funds, every layer. But there's really a lack of manpower to get everybody audited on a regular basis. So they're going to raise the fee that the local governments pay per day to have the audits done, to where they can afford to hire a few more auditors, and then at the same time they're going to come up with what they call risk-based. How frequent you get audited, but some of that would be based on your track record of how good your books are when they get there. They call it risk-based assessments. So people who have a history of being sloppy are going to get audited every year. If you do a good job and you come up with a A+ rating on your audit, they might stretch you out 2 or 3 years. So it'll allow them to get to the places of the trouble spots more frequently, get a few more auditors hired to where the people that need it annually will be able to get it. And there's right now there's some local units that just aren't getting audited because there's just not enough people to get the job done. And so that was an interesting one. And one I thought was really unique and can't believe we had to deal with it there's a bill we passed that only allows one person to claim a homestead credit on the same piece of property. I couldn't imagine, but if you have multiple owners on that jointly own a piece of property, currently you could have 2, 3, or 4 people file a homestead credit on the same house. So we took that loophole and said, one person's going to get it, but not all. There were some college students that went jointly buying a piece of property. All 4 college students all claimed the homestead credit, and there was no way to prevent that. So that was some bills that come along that you think, gosh.
Well, I guess some bills
interesting
make some major changes, but some just clean some things up.
Clean things up a lot of times.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for coming in.
You're welcome.
Look forward to your visit next week.
All right.
Thank you for watching WJTS Inform. Our guest has been Mark Messmer, a state senator. Mark Messmer, who represents this district. We thank you for watching WJTS. Have a good day.